you may not know this about intellectuals or academics or professors that you've met from time to time, but it is actually common that you get to a point where you start to feel a bit disenchanted. There are many reasons why this can happen. I've experienced it myself. For me personally, so much of this happened on the heels of just teaching and just the general education system that we know in America. So much of it was not so much focused on the life of learning, in which there is really a premium on being withdrawn in order to think for its own sake, think about goodness and truth and beauty, the deep things of life as not just a means, but as an end in itself. But in contrast, so much of education actually focuses rather on usefulness. There is a certain pragmatism that can come down quite heavy on both the responsibilities of the student as well as the teacher himself or herself. And ambition is usually not far behind. Whether it's writing books or producing in the classroom or whatnot, there tends to be a focus on what I can get out of it rather than who you are as a person or who you should become. Why it is that we learn and write and think. Is it just for our own agenda, or is it for some deeper reason that has to do with truth itself?
And I think most of us are lucky if we have the chance to teach. In every classroom I've ever been in, there's a bit of life. There are people who really want to learn. And if you focus on those people, what you're doing is meaningful. But in a university or in other kinds of schools, sometimes also, a lot of your work is spent just moving people through who don't necessarily want to be there, who haven't been told anything about why they should be there. So the culture of the university doesn't support them. The students themselves don't bring it to them. And they're in your classroom, and there's limits on what you can actually do, especially when you have large numbers. So, you digest your material, you spit it out, they spit it back at you, you give them their B+ or maybe their A- if they do extra work. And that's it. And that was not the kind of thing that I imagined spending my life doing. It was too, it had a kind of emptiness to it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was how that was sort of the two sources of my crisis. Sense of being useless to real suffering, and the sense that I wasn't even passing on, the habits of mind that I'd been given as when I was a student myself.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you mentioned just a minute ago was I really liked how you put it. You're spitting out information. The students spit it back.
Yes, exactly.
You feel at times like, am I just moving people through? Am I just a channel? And I know that feeling. I think that probably resonates with a lot of people out there, whether they're teaching at a university or maybe K through 12 or in some other setting. And some of that, there's all kinds of reasons I suppose we could explore. Why does that happen? Why is that the case? But one of the things you point out in your book, maybe that gets to the root of this issue, is that there's a real difference between learning for results and learning for the love of the object for its own sake. And, there's been different labels put on this. Sometimes people will speak of classical education where you will see this emphasized. But back to your own story, can you help us? I think for some of our listeners, that might be new to them. And some of them may even have advanced degrees or be teaching at, advanced institutions. But they find themselves really just processing things for the sake of results, whether those are, the results of those who are learning or their own career or their own CV or whatnot. What is the difference? Why is that such a major difference? Why should we not take that difference for granted?
Well, the difference between learning for results and learning for its own sake I think it really is important. It's not always straightforward in practice, which I think is one reason why it's not recognized. So you can see it most clearly, I think, if one of the reasons why I love stories about people in prison or people in very difficult circumstances who have taken on a learning project. They're reading Shakespeare on breaks from their backbreaking job, or they're in prison, like Malcolm X, studying poetry and reading all the history of the world. One of the reasons why I like those examples is because there I think you can really see that these people are doing it. They've got nothing else in it but how it develops them as human beings, as people, as something that changes your way of being.
Yeah.
And I think most of us know, if we don't recognize it in ourselves, most of us know someone who's like that, who's just, they get electric about some topic of learning, and they're not interested in it because of what it gets them. They're interested in it because it fascinates them, and because thinking about the topic helps them to grow and to reimagine things and so on. So it's very important, and it's important in part because we need something in life that's for its own sake, or our life is pointless. It doesn't have to be reading difficult books, but that's one major way. And we definitely don't want to be in a situation where we're following our culture in having everything being results driven.
Yeah.